To get an idea of the impact of feral camels on landholders, we talked to Alice Severin and Lyndee Matthews at Curtin Springs Station in the Northern Territory. I guess people, unless they've experienced it firsthand, really wouldn't know the damage that feral camels can do. Tell us about some of that damage.
Contrary to popular belief that camel ears will tell you that they only eat trees, that's a load of codswallop. And they're no different to us. Would you prefer eating jerky, or would you prefer to have a nice rump steak? And that's what the grass is, a rump steak. The jerky is there all the time. They mix their diet, but as you can see, like now, they'll be into the grass. The biggest thing is when you get, and we've seen them in groups of up to 1,000 in a mob, and that's guesstimate. 5, 10, 1,500, 200, 300, 1,000.
So certainly the environmental issues are a concern, because the country, although it looks beautiful now, as I said, once in a decade, sometimes it takes a long time to get it back. And if the camels do take the trees, particularly the native fruits, the quandongs and the native plums and things, they don't just regerminate this year. We can't say it's going to rain again next month. So it could be 2 or 3 years before we get a new germination on that tree. It could be another 10 years before it starts to get any growth. So, it could be 100 years before you get anywhere near a mature tree back again. So certainly the environmental issues are of concern. But the big one for us has been infrastructure, and primarily fences. So, we run a cattle business. Fences are there for a reason. We need to manage our herd, we need to manage the property, we need to be able to manage the land, rest land, rotate land, do all of those things. And they just take the fences out. They just take them away. It's not as though they just knock them over and you can stand them back up. They just rip all the fences out. So, and
the cost of that must be just enormous.
Well, just to replace it, you're looking at between $2,500 and $3,000 a kilometre. That's just for material, not for labour. And that labour doesn't include going out and rolling up and getting rid of the old stuff.
That's spread all over the countryside, and then putting up the new ones. So, and again, it's not just 2 kilometres of fences. When the Camels went through in early 2007, we lost 140 kilometres of fences. So, to be able to replace those means that we've had to pull all of that profit from the business in the last few years to do the work to replace infrastructure that we already had. So that's 3 years of work in relation to fences that we haven't been able to do anywhere else.
Some of it's just your 4-wire, typical fence, station suspension fencing. A lot of it was electric fence, because I still believe that electric fences have got its place up here. But, around the yards you could have, in some of the older type yards we had, you could have anything up to 13, 14 barbed wires in a fence that high. They're gone.
And we put one around Rocky's Dam, not far from the homestead, and we shortened the length of the fence from what it was originally, because we needed to take some length off it. So it ended up being 1.7 kilometres, and it cost us $40,000. So it was 4x4 steel. How thick was the wall? 4 mil thick. Reinforced strainers every 50 metres, concreted into the ground for a metre, so 3 foot of concrete into the ground, 3 strands of high tensile 3.8 tonne breaking strain cable, 2 heights of mesh. Now the Camels knocked it over before we'd finished it from the inside. They haven't breached it from the outside since we finished it. I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination it's camel proof. What I'm saying is they haven't breached it at this point. But we can't do that for 140 kilometres.
Sure.
And it's ongoing.
Sure.
And as we've said in other forums before, camels form a part of every single decision that we make. Every single decision, every single conversation, every single sense of planning, all has the camel component. Where are we going to put the fence? Where is it going to work so that we can reduce that risk? What's the setup that we're going to do? How much concrete do we need? Where do we need to spend the money for the extra reinforcing? How many bullets do we need? Where are our risk points? And that forms part of every single thing that we do, and has been that way now for more than 3 years. So, the camel question is one that we deal with every day.
What we're talking about here is not 1 or 2 camels or half a dozen camels. Again, can you give us a sense of the sort of number of these things?
Well, back a couple of years ago when we really got hit, Went down to a mate's place because he called us at 5:45 one morning and he had 1,500 for breakfast.
Around the
Like
house,
ran the house and actually had their heads through the window, the kitchen window.
Through the shed, through the house yard, through the kids' toys, all of that sort of stuff.
The days are gone where you'd find a bull camel with his harem of camels, 20 or 30 of them, and a mob of 5 or 6 solo camels because the bulls get kicked out, the males get kicked out. Now you get mobs of males, anything up to 300 and 400.
Shooting an animal is not the easiest thing to do. It's not what we enjoy going out to do. But I'm the one who has to go home and make the books balance. I'm the one who has to go home and make be part of that decision about how we make it continue on into the future. But we've had some rain, and there's been more rain here and to the east of us, not into Western Australia where the big numbers are. So it's only absolutely logical that they start to move. And they're not stupid. They're actually quite an intelligent animal. So
Till they're around fences.
yeah, and then they don't know what to do with them. So, but they, we're hoping that the message has got out in the Bush Telegraph that it's probably not best to be around here. We don't like shooting to waste. We prefer if there was some other options, but the logistics are such that you can't get big vehicles up here. You can't get infrastructure. We don't have the right type of infrastructure in the right areas to be able to do any mustering, let alone be able to pay for choppers and do all of that sort of stuff. And they're not worth enough even if you get them in the yard. So the financial return isn't there. So even if we decided that we wanted to do that on a feral-based animal, the financial return isn't there. In the future, we'd be more than happy, and Ash has talked about it for a long time, about using camels in a rotational grazing system. But it's not the camel behind the fence that's the problem. So it's not the ones that we may end up putting into a domesticated system. It's the feral product on the outside. And there can be, and there should be, and there will be a meat industry based around the camel. But the reality is that it will need to be based around a domesticated product. We can't rely on it into the future on a feral product because the logistics are too hard. It makes the meat completely unviable.
I mean, the rules and regulations, if it's killed in an abattoir, which camels have to be, it's no different to beef, they've got to be killed at a certain temperature and hung up and washed and whatever. You can't do that, Eddie. By the time you get them to town, you've lost your money.
Yeah.
Even under these circumstances, some of the things that you've been saying, you still have, I guess, a sense for some of the features of camels. And
we're farmers.
Yeah, we're farmers and we love our animals, and I don't like shooting camels, but it's a necessity. Yeah. You've got to do it, otherwise you're just not in business.
They are a beautiful animal. There are lots of opportunities that could be utilised in relation to all the parts of the camel.
Guys, that's fantastic. Look, thanks very much. Thanks for your time today. Thanks for bringing us out here, and thanks for your views.
No problem.
Not a worry. Pleasure.